Welcome to the Scholarship Foundation of St. Louis's Financial Aid Basics Workshop. My name is Teresa Steinkamp, and I'm the Director of Advising at the Scholarship Foundation. I'm so thrilled to have you join us for this important conversation. I want to begin by just outlining the objectives for our time together. The first is to get ready. We're going to discuss how to assess where you are in the financial aid planning process and what steps you may take depending on where you are in the process. Next, we will talk about building your support system. So who are the people resources in your life who can help you navigate the process? We will spend a bulk of our time discussing the financial resources that are available to students and families to help them pay for college. We will also then discuss how colleges determine financial need. How do they take the information that a student gives to them to outline a financial aid package? We will then discuss scholarship resources, and finally, I will share some information about the Scholarship Foundation's eligibility criteria for our grant and interest-free loan programs. Before I dive into the specifics of the workshop content, I want to talk a little bit about the guiding principles that the student advising team at the Scholarship Foundation uses. And this really speaks to how we approach the work, including the conversation that will follow. So the first is students first. Students and their needs for accessing and affording college are unapologetically the focus of our approach in advising at the Scholarship Foundation. The second guiding principle is informed decision-making by the student for the student. So at the Scholarship Foundation, advising does not direct or decide for students or families. We provide information and resources so that students are equipped with the information that they need to make the best decision for themselves. As a nonprofit organization with no particular college affiliations, the information and resources we provide are unbiased. The next guiding principle is no sugarcoating. So honestly, this work can at times include a lot of tough conversations. We are always going to be honest, but we are going to share that information with compassion and care. We recognize that there are multiple pathways to reach goals. So when students encounter hurdles on the path to and through college, we are there to help identify and discuss alternate pathways to help reach the goals that the student has set for themselves. And the final piece here is the belief in the power and possibility of education. So we believe in the power of education and that doors to opportunity for education should not be closed to students based on their financial circumstances. Let's talk about our first objective, which is to get ready. So the first piece here is to assess where you, the student, are in the college planning process. So students are going to take similar actions in the college planning and preparation process, but there is a uniqueness to each individual student's path. So think about what year in school you are, whether or not you have a defined list of colleges to which you plan to apply, whether or not you've had conversations with your family about paying for college. The second is to define your timeline. So how much time do you have to get started? And I would encourage you to think about what's going to allow for you to set a comfortable and realistic pace. I would encourage you to consider college admissions deadlines, priority scholarship deadlines, as well as deadlines associated with other financial aid matters. This is important because it can help you to reduce anxiety and identify the areas where you may need help. So this process can be stressful. I don't think I'm telling you anything that you don't know. And so I would encourage you to be proactive and to make a calendar of tasks and deadlines. Use your resources. And we're going to talk about those people resources here in just a few moments. I would challenge you to outline a strategic approach or a plan of action. So knowing the concrete steps that are necessary to reach your goals can be important. This prevents confusion, makes the process easier, and hopefully minimizes the possibility of missing deadlines. So an example that I like to use here is that many students are understandably anxious about finding sufficient dollars to cover their costs. And so occasionally students will spend their effort and energy looking for scholarships, and in the process of doing so may miss a key priority deadline for admissions at a prospective college or colleges that they are considering. And so what happens when a student misses a priority admissions deadline is that they can miss scholarship consideration as well. So it's important to know how your institutions award scholarships, and we'll talk a little bit more about that towards the end of our time together. The fifth piece here is to find a starting point. So you have to get started somewhere, and so I would encourage you to find a place that feels comfortable and to dive in. And my hope is that once you initiate the process and get started, you will find that you can begin to navigate the process a little bit more readily. And then the last piece here, and frankly, one of the most important, is really the importance of having a backup plan, or frankly, 2 or 3 backup plans. And we've actually started to talk at the Scholarship Foundation about these as more of what's called a parallel plan. So in a parallel plan, the student is laying the foundation for multiple possible pathways at the same time. Think of it as laying train tracks. Those are parallel to one another, and at some point the student is going to have to go one direction versus the other because they're going to have to make a decision. But up until the point that they have to make that decision, they've laid the groundwork for more than one potential pathway. Each pathway would be equally satisfactory to them, and it allows them to have all of those things in place early so that there is hopefully less difficulty if they need to change their plan down the road. So next we're going to talk about the people resources. Who are the individuals in the student's life who can help support them through this process? I want to first highlight family. This can be a biological family or chosen family, parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, siblings, really anyone in the student's life who is supportive of their decision to go to college. I do want to speak directly on the topic or to the biological and adoptive parents who may be listening, because you have a unique role in this process when it comes to completion of the FAFSA, which we'll talk about a little bit further in a few moments. The FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid, and for the vast majority of high school seniors, they're going to be required to provide the demographic and financial information of their parent or parents. And so it's important to know that your financial information is likely to be required for the student's aid consideration. The next group is friends and classmates. So we've already determined that each individual student is going to have a uniqueness to their own path. But again, they are going to be taking the same steps at roughly the same point in time. And so I would encourage students to support your friends and classmates. Share information and resources that you have that may benefit those around you, and seek opportunity and information from those around you that may benefit your own college-going process. If nothing else, rely on one another for support, as I know that this can be a stressful process. The next group would be school and college counselors. So you likely have these at your high school. School and college counselors are individuals who can help assist you in a variety of different ways. So a few examples that I want to highlight, of course, they are bringing colleges to the school to speak with you about their programs and the institution. So take advantage of those opportunities to ask questions and get connected with admissions representatives. The counseling office is likely also going to be responsible for sending transcripts to your prospective colleges as part of your applications for admission. And then the vast majority of school or college counseling offices also have some system for posting and distributing information about scholarship opportunities that are local. So if you do not already know, find out how your high school post this information. Is it a physical list in the counseling office? Is it a list on a web page? But find out where it is and then make a practice of checking it regularly, because those local scholarship opportunities can be a great way to find additional sources of financial assistance. The next group is kind of a catch-all, so it's other adults, coaches, work supervisors, people in the student's life. So these folks are, I think, uniquely suited to write letters of recommendation on behalf of the student when they apply for admissions or competitive scholarships or anything else where a letter of recommendation is required. So these individuals can be uniquely suited because they likely have experience with the student's growth over the last few years, leadership skills, as well as their hopes and their goals and their dreams for the future. So students or parents or guardians of students, identify, if you haven't already, who are the individuals who you can ask for a letter of recommendation. Ask them, and then keep those letters on hand for when you may need them. If you need to ask for a letter of recommendation for a specific opportunity, please be sure to give these individuals ample time to complete the recommendation. This next group is college access staff. So it may be that the student participates in any number of the college access programs across the St. Louis metro area. The UMSL Bridge program, College Bound, St. Louis Internship Program, Wyman Leaders. But if they don't, or even if they do, and there are ways in which the Scholarship Foundation can help, please know that that is something that we are available to assist with. Our area of expertise is the financial aid process in particular, and so we would encourage you to reach out and let us know if we can help with things ranging from FAFSA completion to verification to review of financial aid packages, or really anything that will help you as you navigate those financial aid processes. The final group here is the college admissions and financial aid reps at the colleges that the student is considering. So honestly, the college admissions folks are recruitment, right? They're getting paid to get the student to come to their institution. So do not be shy about asking your questions, sharing your concerns, and ultimately getting the information that you need to make an informed decision. On the financial aid side, I know that many of us are conditioned not to talk about money, but the financial aid office and the financial aid administrators are there to assist us in helping ensure that this can be an affordable opportunity for the student and their family. So if you have concerns, if you have unique circumstances that you would like them to know, it's important to begin those conversations. At the end of the day, I do think it's important to point out that although I'm always going to advocate for a student applying to multiple colleges, even if they've got that first choice dream institution, especially if you have that first choice dream institution, building these relationships can be really impactful down the road. And so I would encourage you to be conscientious about laying the foundation for those relationships early in senior year, if not at the end of junior year. All right, so now we're going to dive into the nitty-gritty of financial resources to pay for college. When you hear the term financial aid, I would encourage you to think of it as an umbrella term. There are really 4 types of financial aid underneath that umbrella. They are grants and scholarships, work study, and student loans. So those are the 4 forms. Now, financial aid is typically categorized as either need-based or merit-based. Need-based aid is based off of the student and the family's financial circumstances, and merit-based aid is based off of something the student has achieved or accomplished. So let's take grants and scholarships for a moment. Grants and scholarships are both free forms of financial assistance. They do not need to be repaid. However, grants are more likely to have a need component and scholarships are more likely to have a merit component. That does not mean that grants do not have academic requirements or that scholarships do not have need requirements, but that tends to be the distinction we make between the two. Now, financial aid can also be categorized as gift aid or self-help aid. And so because scholarships and grants do not have to be repaid, they are considered to be gift aid. Work study and student loans are self-help aid, although they are self-help for different reasons. Work study is self-help aid because the student has to secure a job and they earn the financial assistance through a paycheck that they receive via their work study position. Student loans are self-help aid because the student has to repay those, almost always plus interest. Now, there are a few considerations that I would encourage you to make as you are looking for scholarships, in particular as you are looking for scholarships from third-party places or online. And so there are three things that I would encourage you to be mindful of. The first is that with very few exceptions, there should never be a cost to search or apply for a scholarship opportunity. So if you see a fee or someone is asking you to give them some money with a promise of a return on that investment in the way of a particular amount of scholarship dollars, I would do some research before investing your hard-earned money. Typically, those things are not going to have the payoff that we may imagine. The second consideration is whether or not a scholarship is renewable. So senior year of high school tends to be the best year to search and apply for scholarships. It doesn't mean that students can't find additional scholarship opportunities once they arrive on a college campus, but it does get significantly harder. And so we would encourage you to prioritize scholarships that are renewable so that you know that those dollars will be there each year of college and not just the first year, because it does get increasingly difficult to replace those dollars as a student goes through their post-secondary education. The third consideration is whether or not a scholarship is portable. And so what that means is if I start at institution A, can I transfer to institution B and take my outside scholarship with me? In many cases, scholarships can be portable, but there could be some exceptions. So for example, at the Scholarship Foundation, we have a scholarship called the BJC Scholars Fund. If I received the BJC Scholars Fund to attend the University of Missouri St. Louis, but decided to transfer after my first year to Maryville, I would not be able to take my scholarship, the BJC Scholars Fund, from the Scholarship Foundation from Seoul to Maryville. And that is because the BJC Scholars Fund requires that students attend an in-state public school, and as a private university, Maryville would not be eligible for that particular scholarship. So it's important for students to understand those aspects of their scholarship funds, not because they will necessarily transfer, but they could, and it's important to know those details on the front end. Let's talk FAFSA. The FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid, and I want to emphasize once again that free part of the name. So this is a free application, which means you should never have to pay anyone to help you with the FAFSA or to complete it on your behalf. It is a free application. There are lots of places and people who will help you with completing the form for free. You can file it for free at the Federal Student Aid website, which is studentaid.gov. If you go to fafsa.gov, it will redirect you to the studentaid.gov website, but make sure you're at that .gov domain. It is the primary financial aid application. So what that means is for those who are eligible, which would include students who are U.S. citizens, students who are legal permanent residents and have a green card, as well as a handful of other individuals. If you are eligible, it is an essential part of the financial aid process. So in order to receive consideration for any federal aid, state aid in the state of Missouri, including A-plus funds, as well as institutional aid at many colleges, you have to fill out the FAFSA. It is essential, and so we would highly recommend completing it. In the vast majority of school years, the FAFSA for the following year opens October 1st. So this is being recorded in September of 2024. If you are a senior graduating in the class of 2025 and you plan to be filing the 2025-26 FAFSA for your first year in college, the 25-26 FAFSA is anticipated to open by December 1st, 2024. So I would expect that it will open December 1st. There's a slight chance it will open sooner, but I would anticipate that December 1st will be your first day to complete the form. So in the interim, between now and then, the steps that you can take to prepare yourself include creating what's called a Federal Student Aid ID. This is a username and password. A student has to have an FSA ID. It's non-negotiable to get into your FAFSA and sign it. And for the vast majority of high school seniors, because you are going to be required to provide the information for one or both parents on your FAFSA, the parent or parents will also need to have a Federal Student Aid ID. So I'm not going to give a whole lot of additional detail beyond that, but what I do want to say is that for the vast majority of individuals, these IDs are created using their social security number. And I cannot emphasize enough the importance of verifying that the information on your social security card matches what you use to create your federal student aid ID. If anything does not match what is on the card, even if what's on the card is incorrect, your federal student aid ID will not be matched, and it will not be functional until it has been matched with the Social Security Administration. So we have more information about our federal student aid ID recommendations and tips in our Financial Aid Basics workbook, and I would encourage you to review those as you sit down to create it. Of course, if you have questions or you eventually find yourself needing to troubleshoot for a federal student aid ID, please contact a member of the staff at the Scholarship Foundation and we would be happy to assist you. At the end of the day, the FAFSA is a form, but it's really also an algorithm. And so it calculates something called the Student Aid Index, or the SAI. And the SAI is what the student and the family what their financial strength is and what aid eligibility they can expect to receive. I am going to encourage you, and we'll talk more about this when we get to the calculation that colleges use for determining financial need, to view this in your head as a dollar amount. Federal student aid tells us that it is not what you have to or are expected to pay towards the cost of college, but I think you will understand when we look at how colleges determine financial need that in many ways it needs to be considered as a dollar amount. And so I will talk more about that in a little bit. And finally, again, I just want to emphasize, if all of this feels really overwhelming and stressful, there is free help for filing the FAFSA, including from the staff at the Scholarship Foundation. And so if you need assistance, or if you would like to talk to someone about questions or concerns you have, please do not hesitate to reach out and contact us. So when a student files the FAFSA, they are automatically considered for a variety of financial aid programs. And I'm going to begin at the top of this by talking about the federal Pell Grant. So the Pell Grant is a federal grant. It is need-based. All the student has to do to be considered for a Pell Grant is file their FAFSA. It is awarded at the federal level. So if I am Pell eligible, I would expect to receive my Pell Grant wherever I go to school, whether it's the community college, a four-year public, a four-year private, in-state or out-of-state school, as long as that institution participates in federal financial aid. And this is just a moment to highlight that if a school doesn't participate in federal financial aid programs, that is a red flag that we would encourage you to take a step back and do some additional digging on the program to ensure that it is accredited and meets other requirements that would be important for a student pursuing a credential beyond high school. So the maximum Pell Grant is $7,395, but there are students who may be eligible for a Pell Grant who would not expect to receive that maximum amount. So again, that's a maximum amount. It is not something that all students who are Pell eligible receive. So it is based off of your student aid index. And so the lower your student aid index, the more of a Pell Grant you may qualify for, with the eligibility for a Pell Grant capping with an SAI of between 7,500 and 8,000. So once my SAI is greater than that threshold, I would find that I'm not eligible for a federal Pell Grant. So moving clockwise around, the next program that we're going to talk about is FSEOG. This stands for the Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant. It's kind of a mouthful, but this is in many ways similar to Pell. It's a federal grant. It is need-based. All the student has to do to be considered is file the FAFSA. But there are some other key distinctions here that are important to note. The first is that this is a campus-based program. And so what that means is that each college that participates in the program receives an annual allocation. And once the school has awarded their budgeted funds, those dollars are gone. And so the first thing to note is not all colleges participate in SEOG, and the ones that do don't have substantial budgets in the program. So this is not typically a grant program that is going to I guess, make or break a student's ability to attend. The maximum grant award is $4,000, but we are more often seeing smaller award amounts of between $400 and $1,000 as institutions attempt to spread those dollars to as many students as possible. It is a first come, first serve program. It is important to note that when a student files their FAFSA can matter a lot for SEOG funds. We're going to move around again and then move to Access Missouri. So Access Missouri is the state of Missouri's need-based grant program. So I would have to be a Missouri resident attending college in the state of Missouri to receive Access Missouri. The minimum award amount is $1,500. So depending on what the state appropriates for the budget each year and how many eligible students file the FAFSA and meet the deadline, how much a student receives could be more than $1,500. Now, there is an SAI cap, but there were some sort of ongoing changes with that this year. So historically, students have had to have an SAI of 12,000 or below to qualify. And that did increase a little bit this year, but I'm not going to give you a hard and fast eligibility threshold for the 25-26 year, but I would expect that to be eligible, you would expect that your SAI would be 12,000 or less. If your SAI is between 12,000 and 15,000, there's a possibility that you could receive Access Missouri, but I don't know for sure. We'll have to see where things go for the 25-26 school year. Now, A+ is another state of Missouri program. This allows students who've met all of the requirements before graduating from high school to receive tuition reimbursement at any community college in the state of Missouri. I'm not going to say a whole lot about A+ because most students and families who participate in the program know as much about the program, if not more than I do. But one of the points that I want to emphasize is that you do have to file the FAFSA to receive those A+ dollars. The FAFSA is a requirement. And for students who file the FAFSA and find themselves Pell eligible, your Pell Grant will be applied to your bill at the community college first. If your Pell Grant pays for the tuition and fees that A+ would have otherwise covered, A+ will not kick in. So it's important to note that for many Pell eligible students, even if they've done all the requirements for A+, they may not receive those dollars at the community college. I believe the only two schools where Pell and A+ can really work together would be at Rankin and State Tech, because the tuition and fee structure there is higher than at some other community college. The Illinois MAP grant is the state of Illinois' need-based grant program. This would be for Illinois students who attend college within the state of Illinois. It is imperative for Illinois students to ensure that they file their FAFSA as soon as possible after it is available to maximize their consideration for MAP funds. And for students in Illinois who are ineligible to file the FAFSA, that they file the state's form for consideration for MAP grant funds. I want to talk next about federal work study. Federal work study is unique among financial aid programs in that it is not applied directly to the student's bill or balance. The student has to secure a part-time job. That job is almost always on campus. And so, unlike other forms of financial assistance, federal work study awards come to the student via a paycheck that they earn from doing work on campus. Now, work study is a great program, but it's also really competitive. So there are a few things to know. The first is that if you receive a financial aid package in the spring and it has a work study award on it, that does not guarantee that you will receive those funds. Really, those funds are only guaranteed once you've secured the job and begin earning the paycheck. So that's important to note. We have seen increasingly colleges making work study award offers to students, but not necessarily having enough open positions to allow all students who might have the opportunity to earn work study actually secure a position. So if you have a work study award and it's something that you would like to take advantage of, we would encourage you to be proactive about communicating with your prospective college what you have to do to maximize the opportunity of receiving a work study position, and then to be sure that you are applying for those openings as soon as possible. I would also just alert you that some colleges have policies around work study that can be important to note. For example, there are some schools where you have to have secured a work study job by a certain date in the fall semester. Otherwise, those funds may be withheld and allocated to another student. There are some schools that say, perhaps if you do not participate in work study in your first year of college, we won't offer you that same opportunity in your sophomore, junior, and senior year. And so those things are important to know, especially for students who may be hoping to take some or all of their fall semester in that first year to acclimate to college life and adjust to being a college student before adding in a part-time job. The final point that I'll say about work study, which I probably should have said at the beginning, is just that in most work study positions, students are allowed to work on their homework in any downtime they may have. So especially for students who know that they have to work in order to help contribute towards their costs, but also want to ensure that their academic studies do not fall by the wayside as a result of that work, federal work study can be a great way to accomplish both of those objectives. I want to talk about student loans next, and I know that's no one's favorite topic, but there are some important considerations to be aware of as you are making borrowing decisions, which are significant for students and families. So in the Scholarship Foundation's Financial Aid Basics Workbook, there is a chart that outlines good or better loans, or loans that we would encourage you to limit or avoid if at all possible. And so these are the guidelines that we've used to identify where to categorize loans. So the first is federal versus private. So federal loans have significant protections in place on them in a variety of ways. And this is especially true in the repayment portion of the loan. Private student loans in particular are not obligated to have those same protections. So for example, this is not a pleasant thing to think about, but if something happens to the student, if they've borrowed a federal loan, then that federal loan is likely to be forgiven with their passing. On a private loan, there are some examples, unfortunately, of students passing away and their co-signer who may have co-signed for the private loan still having to pay on that loan, or the student losing their co-signer and going into automatic default because they've lost that co-signer. So I am not here to tell you what you can or can't do or what you should or should not do. But this is a consideration that we've thought about very carefully. And if you feel like a private loan is an option you need or want to explore, my best advice is to be sure to read all of the fine print very, very carefully, especially the repayment terms and conditions, because again, the private loans do not have anywhere close to the same protections that exist in the federal lending space. The second consideration is student versus parent. So we would encourage the student to borrow everything in their name before even considering anything in the parent's name. So student loans from the federal government are issued in good faith that the student is going to go to school, graduate, and repay that loan. The interest rates tend to be lower and the repayment terms and conditions tend to be far more flexible. Now, I do want to talk for a moment specifically about something called the PLUS loan, which stands for the Parent Loan for Undergraduate Students. And so PLUS options may be offered to the parent of a dependent student, so the parent who may be listed on a FAFSA. Now, the PLUS loan, the PLUS loan is a federal loan. So again, it is a federal loan and it does hold many, but not all, of the protections that exist on federal student loans. The parent does have to pass a credit check in order to qualify for those funds. So that's the first consideration to be aware of. The second is that the interest rates on the parent loans are substantially higher than the student loans. So I believe the interest rate this year is somewhere between 8 and 9%, but they're capped at 10.5. So that's important to note because those are some pretty big interest rates. The third piece to be aware of is that the plus loans can go up to the cost of attendance minus other financial aid offered to the student. And so what that means in sort of real practice is we have seen schools offer parents $40,000 loans for one academic year. That is a lot for a parent to borrow for 1 year, let alone 4 or 5 or 6 years, especially if they have multiple students and or if they're closer in age to retirement. So again, at the end of the day, I cannot tell you what to do or what not to do, but I would encourage you to be very careful with those plus loans that are available. The third consideration here is subsidized versus unsubsidized. And these terms really refer to when and how interest accrues. So really they refer to the subsidized direct loan and the unsubsidized direct loan on the undergraduate loans available to students. So subsidized loans, the federal government pays the interest for the student all the way through school and through the grace period. They are only responsible for the interest once they begin repayment. The unsubsidized loan begins to accrue interest immediately, and then the student is responsible for all of it over the life of the loan. I'm just going to remind everyone to breathe. I know that the conversation around loans can be stressful and overwhelming, and before we go into the next part, I would just encourage you to take a moment and take a couple deep breaths as we move into determining financial need. All right, so we're about to walk through the calculation that is set at the federal level for how colleges determine financial need and ultimately award financial aid. So every school is supposed to start with what's called cost of attendance, or COA. And cost of attendance is everything that the school estimates the student will need to cover for 1 school year at their institution. And so imagine 2 buckets underneath cost of attendance. The first would include all of the direct costs that the student has to pay to the school: tuition and fees, food and housing if they're living on campus, as well as indirect costs. So indirect costs can include transportation, personal expenses, books and supplies. It can also include food and housing if the student is living off campus or at home. But all of those components make up cost of attendance. The school is then going to subtract the student aid index. So here's what I referred to earlier. The student aid index is, in theory, an indicator of a family's financial health and going to determine what aid they qualify for. However, it is the very first thing that a college subtracts off the cost of attendance. So even if it's not ultimately what you have to pay, it is candidly used in the consideration of what aid you need to be able to cover the cost. And so I am going to encourage you to consider it as a dollar amount. The school can then subtract other financial assistance. So not every student has other financial assistance, but an example of this could be an outside scholarship they've received from another organization of which the school is aware, and that would be considered in this calculation. What's left over is the amount of need, how much the school needs to help the student come up with in order for them to afford to come there for 1 year. They're going to award all of the gift aid or the free money that they can first. And then what's left over is unmet need. And unmet need will be covered all or in part by student loans. I find that having some real numbers helps that calculation make a little bit more sense. So this is information that was pulled from a financial aid package for a student attending the University of Missouri-Columbia. And so the cost of attendance for the 2024-25 school year at the University of Missouri is $35,060. That's tuition and fees, books and supplies, as well as food and housing expenses. This student had a student aid index of 2,314. So again, that's how much the student might have to come out of pocket, but the number that was going to determine their aid eligibility. So this student was offered $16,720 in grant aid. So that's all free money. It does not need to be repaid. In this case, it includes Pell Grant, Access Missouri, as well as institutional scholarships that the student may have received from the university. What's left over is unmet need. And unmet need is, again, covered all or in part by student loans. And just to be candid, this assumes that the student or the family can contribute the student aid index, because if they're unable to contribute that amount, then they're really looking at an unmet need that is over 18,000. And so this is really where the rubber meets the road. So how do students actually fill this gap? So we've talked a little bit about loans. You hopefully remember me referring to the subsidized and unsubsidized direct loans. You may still see them referred to as Stafford loans as well, but the Stafford and the direct loans are the same thing. They're not different loan options. And so each year, a student is eligible to receive a certain amount in loans, and their eligibility is contingent upon two things. First, whether or not they are a dependent or an independent student. And so what that means essentially is, did they put parent information on the FAFSA or not? So students who are required to provide parent information are dependent. Students who are not required to provide parent information are considered independent. The other factor is what year in school they are going to be, and this is typically determined by credit hours, the number of credit hours they have earned. In order to be considered a credit level sophomore, you have to have earned more than 30 credit hours, for example. So dependent students are eligible for $5,500 their first year of college, $6,500 as a sophomore, $7,500 as a junior and a senior. Independent students, or little asterisk here, dependent students whose parents have gone through the credit check for the PLUS loan and been denied, are also eligible for the independent borrowing levels. These students would be eligible for $9,500 their first year of college, $10,500 as a sophomore, and $12,500 in their junior and senior year. Now, of these eligibility caps for dependent and independent students each year, the most that can be subsidized, so again, this is the better borrowing option for students where the federal government covers the interest until the student enters repayment. The most that can be subsidized is $3,500 as a first-year student, $4,500 as a sophomore, and $5,500 as a junior and senior. Your lifetime eligibility on subsidized direct loans is $23,000. Your lifetime eligibility for loans in the undergraduate space in the direct loan program is $31,000 total as a dependent student and $57,500 as an independent student. So when you think about the gaps that you might see on a financial aid package, or if you hear things in the public conversation around students who borrowed $100,000 to pay for a bachelor's degree, I can promise that many of them have secured private loans to do so, because the federal government has strict limits in place on what a student can borrow. So it's important to stay organized in this process. I would encourage you first to have an organizational system that works for you, whatever that is. So whether it's a hard copy organizational filing system or a digital copy, but something that will allow you to stay organized. Save everything, document important things, and keep originals. So I know that anymore the vast majority of these steps and processes take place electronically, but in the event that you are asked to mail anything or send anything via fax, or even honestly send anything back via a PDF scan, keep the original again as a hard copy or as a digital copy, so that in the event that something gets lost in transit or transmission or upon arrival, you don't find yourself having to complete paperwork a second time, because that can be quite frustrating. The third recommendation is, as you are admitted to colleges, they will invite you to create access to student portals and college email accounts. I don't think you have to make a practice of checking them every day, but I would encourage you to make a practice of checking them routinely. Colleges do send really critical points of communication to these accounts, and so I would encourage you to check them early and often. So, how to implement a successful scholarship search? I would encourage you to start with your prospective college or colleges first. Know how they award institutional scholarships. Is it through a priority admissions deadline? Is there a separate scholarship application? Do they award some through admissions and some through a separate process? And what are the deadlines for all of those? Again, it's really critical to know. The second is to research local opportunities next. So we would recommend myscholarshipcentral.org. This is a great scholarship database for students from across the St. Louis region, and it allows you to create one account, complete a general application, and then be matched with scholarship opportunities from the St. Louis metro area or the state of Missouri, and you can apply for them all in one spot. And then to check with your school counselor. So the rationale for recommending your prospective college and the local opportunities is just honestly shrinking the pool of competition for those scholarship programs. And so although there can be good scholarship opportunities available nationally, we would recommend that that be your last stop. Not because they may not be reputable or good opportunities, but because students typically have to really stand out in a very, very large field to receive those awards. And so you increase your success rate by starting local or with the schools that you're considering. So these are our final helpful hints. Apply early. I cannot emphasize it enough, the importance of getting applications submitted early, on time, by deadlines. It is so, so very critical. Missing deadlines can be one of the biggest determining factors in whether or not a student receives the aid that they need. Again, I also can't emphasize enough the importance to applying to more than one school. So I understand having a dream institution or a school that is strongly preferred, but it is essential in our current landscape to give yourself options. So we need look no further than the recent pandemic in 2020, the closure announcement of Fontbonne in the past year, to see just two reasons why it's important to have options available, because there are circumstances that are beyond our control that may require us to make a change later in the process. And those are just examples. We see far more regularly the importance of applying to more than one school is because students need to have the ability to compare financial aid packages and really assess which one's going to be the most affordable for them. And you won't know unless you've submitted an application and received that financial aid offer from the school, which one is truly going to be the most affordable for you. Cost and affordability are not the same thing. So this is not an endorsement per se of the private colleges, but what I do think is important to point out is that a high cost school is not necessarily unaffordable if what financial aid they offer you allows it to be affordable. So I would encourage you to apply to the schools that interest you because they have your program, because they have the traits of a college campus that are important to you, whatever support systems on campus that you need to be successful, and then see who makes you the best financial aid offer. It may be that the higher cost school offers a better financial aid package. That may not be the case, but don't rule them out immediately because of the sticker price. If you need to appeal early. Schools occasionally hold back financial aid for an appeals process, and if they have a pool of funds for appeals, those are likely going to be awarded sort of first come, first serve, and so it's necessary to begin those conversations as early as possible. And then know your own personal loan or debt limit. As I've said a couple times, it's not my place to tell you what to do or to direct or decide for you. And I would encourage you to have candid conversations with the loved ones in your life and reflection for yourself about what you feel comfortable borrowing, and then to take those reflections and conversations into your decision-making process as it relates to student loans in the coming months. All right, so I referenced that I would share just a little bit with you about the Scholarship Foundation's grant and loan eligibility. So the Scholarship Foundation has a variety of different scholarship grant programs, as well as an interest-free, fee-free student loan. We have criteria that is used across all of our programs. They include financial need, academic potential, and strong character. So we're looking for a student aid index of 17,500 or less, a 2.0 cumulative GPA or higher, and the good character is typically demonstrated through the letter of reference and the timeliness of application materials. Students do have to be permanent residents of the program's eligible service area. And I say eligible service area because some of our scholarship programs have slightly different service area requirements. So many of our programs are open to students in the entire St. Louis metro area, but some are open to portions of the St. Louis metro area or to students outside of the St. Louis metro area. So read through those eligibility criteria very carefully. For most of our programs, students can attend any school in the country as long as the school is accredited and not-for-profit. All of our funding is renewable, provided the students continue to meet requirements and submit the renewal application each year. And our applications are due April 15th. This is the student advising team at the Scholarship Foundation. So as I've referenced already, you are able to reach out to any one of us at any time with questions or concerns you may have. If you need assistance with the FAFSA, with verification paperwork, with a dependency override, if you'd like to sit down and compare financial aid options, or talk further about the Scholarship Foundation's programs, any one of us would be more than happy to do so. I want to point out that we do have a bilingual student advisor on staff, so if you need translation assistance in Spanish, Lily would be your point of contact. Thank you so much for joining us for this conversation on financial aid. I understand that it can be overwhelming and a lot of information to digest. I hope that if you have questions or concerns, if anything jumped out at you that you wish to discuss further with a student advisor, that you will reach out to our office or to a member of our advising team. And know that we are in your corner and more than happy to do what we can to assist you in navigating this process. Take care.